Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in between, and whoever is listening. Welcome to Scallop Story Time. It's the spooky season. Halloween is but a week away, and I thought it might be fun to celebrate this autismal, spooky, fun time of year with a dramatic reading of a book I came across that just came out this year. It's a continuation of the classic The Nightmare Before Christmas, written by Shea Earnshaw, a New York Times bestseller, called Long Live the Pumpkin Queen. It takes place after Nightmare Before Christmas. The synopsis is as follows. Sally Skellington is the official, newly minted Pumpkin Queen after a whirlwind courtship with her new love, Jack. Sally adores Jack with every inch of her fabric seams, if only she could say the same for her new role as Queen of Halloween Town. Cast into the spotlight and tasked with all sorts of queenly duties, Sally can't help but wonder if she's traded her captivity under Dr. Finkelstein for a different, albeit gilded, cage. But when Sally and Zero accidentally uncover a long-hidden doorway to an ancient realm called Dreamtown, she unknowingly sets in motion a chain of sinister events that will put her future as Pumpkin Queen and the future of Halloween Town itself in jeopardy. Can Sally discover what it means to be true to herself and save the town she's learned to call home, or will her future turn into her worst, nightmare? Sounds interesting. So in these days leading up to my, second favorite holiday, I thought I'd treat you guys to a dramatic reading of this published fan fiction, although I guess it might as well be called canon since it's published by Disney. I'm going to get through as much of the book as I can between now and Halloween, possibly going into Day of the Dead. I hope you guys enjoy it. Quick disclaimer. I do want you to know that I am dyslexic, so some words might get jumbled around, and also I can't guarantee this book will actually be any good because it is a published fan fiction. The story starts with a quote. I sense there's something in the wind that feels like tragedy's at hand. From the first movie. Prologue. At the crisp, inky hour of midnight, Jack and I are married atop Spiral Hill in the Death's Door Cemetery. Wind stirs the bone-dry leaves, and Jack takes my soft ragdoll hands in his, the coolness of his fingers calming the flutter rippling across my stitched seams. The mayor stands broad-chested before us, officiating the ceremony, his face alternating between corkscrew-eyed elation and pale, ghastly tears, while we speak our vows to each other in the grim custom of an ancient wedding eulogies. The moon is a bloody red in the sky, a good omen, and a wilted oleander flower plucked from a patch of poison ivy at the far end of Halloween Town is tucked behind my left ear, a custom that ensures a long, dreadful life. I squeeze Jack's hands together, tighter. His black tuxedo tails sway in the cold night air while my dress, stitched from a scrap of black spinster lace sewn by myself the night before, billows like a ghost in the breeze. Cautiously, my gaze flicks to the crowd, where I can feel the cold, spiteful eyes of Dr. Finkelstein watching me from the front row, mouth quivering in fury now that I am finally escaping him, once and for all. I am no longer your creation, I think, words knitted tight in my chest. It seems unimaginable that barely a year ago I feared I might spend my life trapped in Dr. Finkelstein's lab, fated to only ever watch Jack from afar, loving him, but certain he would never know the ache I felt whenever he looked my way. But after Jack tried to steal Christmas from Sandy Claus, after he nearly died venturing to the human world to deliver our grim presents on Christmas Eve, with Zero leading his sleigh of skeleton reindeer, a plan I sensed was doomed from the start. I knew I couldn't spend my life without him. I knew I wouldn't waste another night. Under a dark, snow-flecked sky, Jack and I walked out to the cemetery, his moon-hollow eyes sinking into mine. And at last, after a lifetime of loving him from afar, my ragdoll heart aching to know what it would feel like if he ever loved me back, we shared our first kiss on the crest of Spiral Hill. The same place where we now stand, hand in hand. The mayor's face spins back around to reveal his wide, toothy grin, his black widow bow tie eerily shiny in the moonlight, and he announces Jack and me as husband and wife, voice bellowing over the crowd. Jack leans forward, eyes damp at the edges, and presses his grave cold mouth to mine. And my seams feel like they're going to fray and burst, like they can't contain the swollen, chest-widening feeling rupturing through me, a feeling so strange and unknown, in particular, that it makes me dizzy, makes my head swim, my legs teeter. Jack and I are married. He wipes away the tear streaming down my cotton cheekbone to my chin and looks at me like his own chest is about to fracture. And for a moment, I'm certain that they should just bury us both there at the center of the graveyard, married and died on the same day, unable to contain the unspeakable, awful, wondrous emotion breaking against our eyelids. The dreadful residents of Halloween Town applaud, tossing tiny dwarf spiders at our feet as we leave the cemetery, and the warmth in my chest feels like bats clamoring for a way out of my ribcage, trying to break me apart. I am now Sally Skellington, the Pumpkin Queen, and I'm certain I will never again be as happy as I am right now. Oh, good God. Chapter 1. The evening skyline of Halloween Town is dotted with tiny pinholes of starlight, and across the town square, pumpkins glow a sinister copper orange. From Jack's house atop Skull Hill, the town looks different, draped in long finger-like shadows. The air smells different, too, like black licorice and raven wings and a little like pumpkin jam. Nothing like the foul stench of sodium chloride and rubbing alcohol that permeates Dr. Finkelstein's lab, a place that was once my home, but also a prison. The memory of it churns inside me, entwined with a feeling of stark relief that I will never again sleep inside that cold observatory, never lie awake alone in a narrow, moth-eaten bed, staring through the tiny window up at Jack's house in the distance, daydreaming of living within its walls someday. It feels like a fairy tale from one of those happily ever after books, where the princess storms the castle, slays a goblin dragon, and takes over the kingdom for herself. Except I'm not golden-haired or fine-boned. I have no bones at all. I am a rag doll who married a skeleton king. A ragdoll who woke from the impossible daydream and found herself in her own heroine story, a tale whose ending hasn't yet been written, but instead is only just beginning. I leave the terrace overlooking the town and move back into the bedroom I now share with Jack, facing the tall spiderweb cracked mirror leaning against the slanted wall. I run my fingers through my hair, pulling it downward over my shoulder, the scarlet strands so coffin straight they could never be coiled or coiffed or pinned up with bat bows. I press my palms against my patchwork dress, staring at my reflection in the glass. The crossed seams along my chest, the smile seams at the corners of my mouth, the places where Dr. Finkelstein stitched me together. Needle and thread and sinister midnight conjurings. His creation, made in the dark, damp shadows of his lab. A dead leaf pokes out of the seam along the inside of my left elbow, my stuffing coming loose, and I quickly push it back into place. My threads need to be restitched, leaves gathered and restuffed. "You ready?" Jack asks. I turn, and he's standing in our bedroom doorway, holding a black velvet suitcase. The bottomless caverns of his eyes like graves I would happily tumble into, down, down, down forever without end. A spider, a remnant of the wedding, skitters free from inside the suitcase and runs along the handle before it drops to the floor and falls into a crack. I had wanted to gather herbs from the garden, nightshade and bottle thorns, to take with us, just in case. But Jack assured me that I wouldn't need such things on our honeymoon. "Potions and poisons aren't necessary outside of Halloween Town," he had said. There would be no need to poison or put anyone into a deadly sleep. But it's hard for me to imagine a world where such things aren't needed. I turned to smile at Jack, the seams on my cheeks stretching wide, and placed my hand around the sturdy bones of his arm. My husband. The man I have loved for so long. At times it seems like it might crack me open, and together we step out into the cool twilight of Halloween Town. At the front gate of our home, guarded by 2 iron cats, spines raised, Jack pushes open the gate to face the waiting crowd, eager to catch a glimpse of the newly married king and queen, and clears his throat. "My wife, Sally, and I are off to our honeymoon," he announces, grinning, showing all of his corn kernel teeth. "We'll be back tomorrow. If anything should happen, the mayor will be in charge." The mayor, who stands beside one of the fanged metal cats, jerks his shoulders back at the same moment. His face spins around, revealing the downturned slope of his crooked mouth and the deep worry in his small eyes. "Is that such a good idea, Jack?" he asks nervously. "Perhaps someone else should be in charge. Or maybe we could elect a committee. I'm not sure I can make decisions if an important matter were to arise. Or you could delay the honeymoon until after Halloween. It's only 2 weeks away," he reminds Jack. "Spring is a perfect time for a trip. Or better yet, just skip the honeymoon altogether." "You'll do great," Jack says, clapping the mayor on the shoulder. The mayor briefly reveals his smiling face, as if for a half-second he believes he's up to the task, before his features swivel back around, lips a grim blue, worrying, rimming his terror-struck eyes. But Jack is unfazed by the mayor's apprehension. It's nothing new, and we make our way through the crowd. Jack shaking hands, accepting the congratulations of the townspeople who shuffle close, too close, crushing against us, hands reaching out to see us off. But I slink back. The eyes of everyone on me feel like thorny stabs across my linen flesh, pulling me apart bit by bit. I'm not used to all the attention, the whites of their eyes like hollowed-out ghosts peering into my empty soul, judging, appraising. Sally the Rag Doll, our pumpkin queen. There was a festering thought inside me. Perhaps they'll think I'm not worthy of the title. A rag doll should never be queen. A rag doll who should go back to the darkness of Dr. Finkelstein's lab, cold and solitary and alone. They look at me like they're considering eating me whole. Some of them probably would. But then I catch a flash of white to my left, and Zero appears, pushing through the onlookers to nudge me in the elbow with his glowing jack-o'-lantern nose. I stroke his ghostly white coat, the soft, transparent feel of his fur, his sagging ears. The tightness in my chest calms, and he smiles his loose, open dog grin. To Zero, I'm no different than I was yesterday, before I married Jack, before I became queen. With Zero hovering at my side, I followed Jack through the town center, ducking through the last of the crowd, just as Lock, Shock, and Barrel, also known woefully as Boogie's boys, shout, "We'll miss you, Pumpkin Queen!" They've removed their trick-or-treat disguises, revealing their true faces, which are somewhat perplexingly identical to their masked facades. and they grin like the young children they are. Yet there's always a sly, crafty undertone hidden in their shimmering eyes that can never be trusted. It isn't their grins or their scheming giggles that send chills down my spine. My spine. That send chills down the uneven stitching of my spine. However, it's the name they called me. Pumpkin Queen. It's the first time I've heard it said out loud, and it rings in my ears all the way into the forest, to the hinterlands, and the grove of 7 trees. "Are we sure it's safe?" I asked Jack, his face marred by shadows from the towering spiny branches overhead. There is no wind on our walk through the woods, yet now the circle of trees shivers and vibrates, beckoning us closer. Jack taps a finger on the broad tree with the perfect heart, painted a buttery pink, carved at the center. We are standing in the circular grove of 7 trees that lead to 7 holidays, where last year Jack slipped into Christmas Town and kidnapped Scandy Claus. I've never been outside Halloween Town. I've never ventured beyond its borders, and I spin around now, slightly breathless, marveling at each of the carved trees, each strange carved tree, each with its own peculiar doorway. A green 4-leaf clover adorns the tree for St. Patrick's Day. A red firework for the 4th of July. A giant turkey marks the entrance to Thanksgiving. A pale painted egg for Easter. A Christmas tree with its tiny baubles and lights leads to Christmas Town. And lastly, a grinning orange pumpkin for our home, Halloween Town. After a pause, Jack steps towards the painted heart doorway. A pink and white striped box set near the trunk of the tree. "Of course," he answers, and I hear the excitement in his voice. He's been to all the holidays, all the towns, except for this one. He's been saving this tree for me. "I imagine Valentine's Town will be more wondrous than all the rest, and now we'll see it together." He kisses the back of my hand, eyes tumbling into mine. Then he tugs open the heart-shaped door nested in the trunk of the tree. A wind coils out from inside, soft and warm, smelling faintly of sugar cookies and wild roses. I've never smelled anything so wondrous. Still nervously, I spin the bone-white wedding band on my finger, my eyes tracing the deadly nightshade vines engraved along the outer edge, a plan that has meant freedom for me, a way to escape Dr. Finkelstein each time I poison him with the nightshade from the garden. "You are free now," I remind myself, because although there is a buzzing curiosity in my chest, there are also nervous crow wings flapping in my stomach. But when I lift my gaze to Jack, his moonless eyes settle the resting crows, and the corner of my mouth tips upward. "I trust you," I say. "Because I do, more than anything." Jack nods, stepping his long, spidery legs through the opening into the tree, and pulls me in after him. Chapter 2. We fall headlong through the doorway, as if caught in a hallowed breeze, until at last we spill out on the other side, landing in Valentine's Town, a place wholly unfamiliar and strange. Quickly, I run my fingers down my legs, checking my threads and seams to be sure none have split or tugged loose. Then I breathe the gentle, sweet scent of sugared chocolate and roses in bloom. Surrounding us are a grove of trees, nearly identical to our own. 7 trees grown in a circle, one for each of the 7 holidays. Yet the forest overhead is thick with tall, swaying branches, green leaves, and tiny white flowers, stirring loose with each gust of wind. Nothing like the bony, leafless trees that populate the woods in Halloween Town. Jack weaves his fingers through mine, grinning curiously, like he's just sprung from a shadow and frightened a ghost back into the dark, one of his favorite pastimes, and we follow the winding path out of the forest, away from the grove of 7 trees. I run my fingers along the dusty pink poppies and vibrant blood-red roses that line the path, and when we finally step free of the dense forest, I peer up at a cloudless sky, shimmering a soft, airy pink. "It's daylight here," I commented, surprised. "When we left Halloween Town, it was night." "Every town is its own keeping of time, of sunrises and sunsets," Jack says, waving a hand towards the sky. "They're called time zones." I squeeze his hand tighter, feeling briefly off-center, like my seams are tugging too tightly against my skin. Traveling from one town to another, one time zone to another, is strangely disorienting, and my head whirls and spins as if I might tip over. "Where's their graveyard?" I ask as we follow the path through a rose-studded meadow, nearing the edge of the town. In Halloween Town, our graveyard rests on the outer border near the gate, where the howling voices of the dead can be heard echoing through the streets each night. And I expected to see one by now. If their cemetery is too far away, how will they ever be able to hear the tormented spirits of the dead? "Not every holiday town has a graveyard," Jack explains, giving me a wink. "But look at all the hearts!" He points a bone-sharp finger towards an iron gate up ahead, hundreds of tiny harps forged into the woven silvery metal. On each side of the gate sits 2 cherry blossom trees, the branches grown, or maybe trimmed, into the shape of a massive towering heart. It's an odd, unnatural sight, though certainly beautiful, and I wonder if here in Valentine's Town all the plants grow into unusual shapes. The trees sway and bob in the wind, releasing their tiny blossoms into the air. "What do hearts mean?" I asked. "Apparently, Valentine's Day is a holiday that happens every February." Jack raises the bones above his eyes into his forehead. "And humans surprise one another with sweets and roses and poorly written love poems. Why?" "Who knows?" Jack grins, tossing his gaze towards the town. "But isn't it wonderful?" And truthfully, Valentine's Town is unexpectedly charming, in an odd sideways sort of way. No sooty sky or charcoal buildings teetering in the distance, no rotted skulls or jack-o'-lanterns glowing sinisterly in the dark, no cackling ghouls or demons or grim reapers with hollowed-out eyes watching us from the shadowed corners. In fact, there are no dark places at all. Instead, everything is bright and confectioner's sugar shiny. The air has a pinked, dreamy quality, a subtly sweet tinge, like rosebuds newly bloomed in spring or the first lick of pumpkin pie spilling on a spoon. It all seems twisted up and spit out wrong. Yet my eyes sway from one hedged rose bush to another, my heart lilting in my chest in a way that makes me dizzy. We pass through the heart-forged gate, and I can feel my seams relax just a little, my dead leaves settling in my chest, when the sky is blotted out above us. A mass of birds flock towards town, muting the candy-tinted sun. But when I squint up at them, trying to make sense of their odd shape, I realize they're not birds at all. It's a flock of small baby-like creatures. 5 of them fluttering above us, rosy-cheeked and plump-bellied, with tiny wooden bows and heart-shaped arrows strapped in the sheaths at their small backs, wings flapping. "What are they?" I ask. "No idea," Jack replies with a grin. But they either don't notice us or don't care, and they continue their flight towards the shimmering mass of buildings ahead. The worn dirt path soon becomes a cobblestone street, taking us straight into the heart of Valentine's Town, and my eyes widen, not wanting to miss a single detail of the white, chalky stone homes that line the street. They look almost edible, with pink-tiled roofs and heart-framed windows, and the stained glass reminds me of melted sugar, like you could press your tongue against it and it would surely taste sweet. I feel myself grinning wildly as Jack, grinning as widely as Jack, urging him on, until at last we reached the town center, marked by a stone fountain with a carved, cherry-cheeked baby at the top, identical to the flock of baby creatures we saw flying overhead just outside of town. I lean against the edge of the fountain, peering down at the water, which glistens a pale candy pink, nothing like the swampy green fountain in Halloween Town. My reflection staring back. "Do you think we can drink it?" I ask, inching my hand towards the water, certain it will taste like icing and marigold petals. But before my fingertips can break the surface, a cool, velvety voice speaks behind us. "It's nice to see two lovers in town." I straighten and look up, and up, until at last meeting the gaze of a woman who is a good foot taller than Jack. She is a tower, wearing a long chiffon gown with tiny white embroidered hearts stitched into the cream fabric of her shirt. Her strawberry red hair is coiled up into a honeycomb beehive, with a gold heart barrette clipped softly at her temple. "Visiting from elsewhere?" she asked vaguely, tapping her rosebud lips with a long painted fingernail. Her skin is a soft pinkish hue, as if she's been eating too many rose petals and it has begun to change the color of her flesh. "I'm Jack Skellington," my husband announces, sticking out his hand. "The Pumpkin King, from Halloween Town. And this is my bride, Sally, the Pumpkin Queen." Yes, good," she replies, ignoring his hand, as if she's uninterested in our names or the details of why we're here. She cares more about her own introduction. "I'm Queen Ruby Valentino, and this is my town." She trails a long, elegant hand along one side of her dress in a flourished, wide, sweeping curtsy. I marvel at how poised she is, abloom with confidence. Even the features of her face are neat and organized, not a stray freckle out of place. She is a visage of what I've imagined a perfect royal etiquette might look like, and I suddenly feel quite unqueen-like in her presence. "It's our first visit to Valentine's Town," Jack replied cheerfully, shoulders back, undaunted by this woman's regal demeanor. But Ruby's eyes suddenly snap away from us. "Gah!" she exclaims. "A bleeding heart! Paolo! I told you to rip these out as soon as you see them." A slim, high-waisted man appears as if he's been crouched behind Ruby, awaiting any command she might thrust upon him. Wearing an apron, a straw hat, and long pale slacks, and clutching a pair of gardening shears in his dirtied hand, he wipes at his forehead quickly. "So sorry, Your Royal Highness. I must have missed that one." Ruby gracefully bends toward the ground, despite her heavy gown and high heels, plucking a single flower with a blood-red center that had been growing between the stone pavers that surround the fountain. She holds the flower up for us to see. "Can't have these bleeding hearts growing so near the fountain," she says, her mouth contorting into a disgusted little sneer. I blink at the tiny, harmless-looking flower pinched between her fingers, summoning the question inside of me that I'm afraid as a child to speak. "Why's that?" My voice sounds much too small, meager and weak, not the words of a queen. Ruby flicks her gaze to me, her sneer softening. "The Cupids dip their arrows into the fountain, of course." She says it like I should already know this, and I gaze down into the water, light shimmering across the surface like little pink diamonds. "Our love potion bubbles up from a natural spring beneath the fountain. She raises her perfectly plucked eyebrows at me. "If a bleeding heart flower made its way into the fountain, then everyone who was struck by a Cupid's arrow on Valentine's Day would suffer a broken heart instead of falling in love." She tosses the flower onto the ground and crushes it with the toe of her lollipop red high-heeled shoe. When she lifts her foot, Paolo, the man who stands with hands wringing beside her, quickly skitters forward and retrieves the flattened flower from the ground. "I'll burn it immediately," he says, then scurries off. Ruby smiles softly, pleased, and tilts her gaze back to Jack and me. Do you have a place to stay? Jack clears his throat. Not yet. Follow me, she says with a flourish, her voice now a sing-song. A collection of musical notes as though a bird is resting at the back of her throat, and she leads us away from the fountain. We pass a cafe, where the scent of rising dough fills the air, and a dentist office, where a painted window reads, half-price cavity repair. Then in the smaller print, free lollipop with each tooth removal. The people who stroll past us, doughy-eyed and full-cheeked, always seem to be in pairs, arms woven together, secret words whispered into each other's ears. They sit side by side on cafe patios, facials nestled together, kisses planted on bare cheeks, and many of them have tulips pinned at their lapels, or tucked neatly into shirt pockets, while others have wildflowers braided into their hair. Love is imbued into every seam and stitch of this town. It's inescapable, and I feel the dead leaves in my chest swelling and swimming at the sight of it all. Another block more, and Ruby stops in front of a brick building. Above us, the swaying wooden sign reads, Lovebird Inn. Wait here, she says, winking, then disappears into the narrow doorway. Moments later, she reappears clutching a silver key. You'll be staying in one of the cottages around back. They're perfectly quaint and well appointed. You should be quite happy there. Jack smiles, taking the key from her. Splendid! Thank you! Ruby resecures a stray pin that has come loose from her wavy cherry-red hair just as her eyes flash upward. Slow down! She shouts. Above us, a clod of the winged babies flutter over the town before disappearing into the distance. Ruby lets out an irritated sigh. The Cupids are so unruly this time of year. Restless little troublemakers. She gives me a look, as if I should have an idea of what she's talking about. They grow bored with nothing to do, just waiting for February, for Valentine's Day. So they fly in packs, stirring up all sorts of mischief. She blows out a quick breath through her nostrils. Cupids can be only trusted on Valentine's Day. The rest of the year, they're an awful nuisance. Ruby peers at me with her soft chocolate eyes, gaze roving from my feet to the top of my head, like she's surveying my appearance for the first time. She tilts her head and plants a delicate hand on her hips. Your hairstyle is a little dull for a queen, she remarks. My stylist could weave in a few curls, maybe a highlight or two, have you looking a little more... She taps a fingernail against her bottom lip. Well, like me. A smile sparks in her clear, dewy eyes. I'd be happy to make an appointment for you while you're here. I shake my head quickly, not liking the prying feel of her eyes on mine, the sharp, appraising look. I don't think... I start, picking at the loose thread on my left wrist, making it worse. No, thank you. She shrugs, turning her attention up the street, where two lovers are entangled in the doorway of a chocolate shop, a tall, lean, dark-haired man reciting words to a man with curly blonde hair and freckles, a poem that it seems he's written himself, the words scribbled onto a pink piece of paper he holds in his palm. Ruby sighs softly, as if caught in the sweetness of the moment, the tenderness between two people madly, deliriously in love. She wipes at her eye, as if a tear is about to fall, then she turns to look back at me. Say, she begins, her eyelashes fluttering, you two wouldn't happen to know someone named William Shakespeare? Jack lifts the bones above his hollow eyes. Sorry, no. Ruby lets out a long, troubled sigh, puckering her full painted lips. He writes the most beautiful sonnets, and I'm certain he is my one true love, but I'm having a terrible time finding him. Jack pauses, and we share a look. There are many books in Jack's library written by William Shakespeare, beautiful, old, tragic stories. But they are rather old, and I'm certain William Shakespeare is good and dead, quite some time ago now. But I give Jack a quick shake of my head, not wanting to break Ruby's heart by telling her as much. If we come across him, Jack adds with a gentle smile. We'll certainly send him your way. Thank you. Ruby's mouth curves upward, even though her eyes betray a glimmer of sadness. I hope you both enjoy your stay with us. It would be a lovely day to stroll the city. Make sure you stop at Romeo's Delicatessen. They make the most divine caramel teardrops you've ever had in your life. I have no idea what a caramel teardrop is, but I'm certain Romeo's Delicatessen is named after Romeo from Shakespeare's play Romeo and Juliet, a reminder of the man Ruby has never met but loves anyway. She gives us a quick curtsy before turning away and sauntering down the cobblestone street. I watch her a moment as she stops to speak to shop owners and townspeople, shaking hands, a queenly silhouette against the sugared, heart-carved backdrop of her town. I'm certain I don't cast quite as striking a queenly figure in Halloween Town. I'm all rounded edges and dead leaves spinning out from loosed seams. I'm nothing like her. A sharp blade of doubt edges into my thoughts. Maybe I am more unprepared for this role than I realized. But Jack folds his hands over mine, and the look of excitement in his eyes forces my own stirring thoughts to retreat. We find the path that winds around the Lovebird Inn to where a dozen small cottages sit like kisses nestled between the tall grass and rustling white pine trees. Jack slides the key into the lock of cottage number 5, set on the far left of the others. Who else comes to stay here? I asked curiously. Anyone, I suppose, he said. Those from other holidays who pass through the doorways and want a weekend away, a vacation. We push into the little cottage and are met with the scent of vanilla jasmine candles and rose petals scattered along the wood floor. Jack places our suitcase beside the bed. Why does no one come to Halloween Town to visit? I asked, walking to the lace curtain and pulling it back to look out onto Valentine's Town. We don't have an inn. Jack's eyes lift, his peculiar smile curling upward. Perhaps we should. Tourism might be good for the town. I let the curtain fall back into place, and Jack crosses the room, taking my hands. There's so much to see, he says at last, kissing my palm, and not a moment to waste. With our suitcase now deposited into our cottage, we venture back out into Valentine's Town. The day is a whirl of chocolate confections dipped in hazelnuts and caramelized brown sugar, raspberries coated in white chocolate, and chalky little hearts with words stamped onto their surface. Love bug, sweet pea, XOXO. We eat them by the handful, our cheeks flushed from the sugar, chests thumping wildly. We even pass a factory where the hearts are made. Stacks of little brown boxes lined up in the windows, surely to be delivered to the human world once Valentine's Day arrives. Even the air smells sweet, I say, popping a cherry truffle into my mouth as we wander the cobbled streets, feeling the chocolate break apart on my tongue. Jack takes my hand and twirls me in a circle. I knew you'd love it here. I think how heavenly it must be to nibble on tiny cakes and swirled caramels and plum ginger puffs all day. Tea with lemon petite fours in the afternoon, after-dinner mint truffles with butterscotch coffee in the evening. My mind swims with the notion of it. The easy, sugar-induced lull that would follow me into candy-tinted dreams each night. Life here in Valentine's Town would surely be simple and uncomplicated. Outside a small patisserie, the window display filled with trays of butter cookies, a squat woman is ordering a box of meringues from the gray mustached man in the doorway, and beside her is a lace-trimmed pram, filled with 3 wailing babies. They all have a swirl of dark hair atop their otherwise bald heads, skin the color of figs like the woman, with lips stained a bright pink, and dusting of powdered sugar along their fingertips and white bibs. I bend down and touch the chubby hand of one of the crying infants, and it immediately grabs my pointed finger and squeezes, giggling. showing its gummy, toothless mouth. The other 2 infants stop crying and peer up at me with their moon saucer eyes, all gazing me as if they were looking at the night sky in wonder. Well done, the squat woman remarks, nodding down at me. They usually don't quiet for anything but sweets, but they certainly like you. She places a box of cookies atop the little awning of the pram. Are they cupids? I ask, curious why these babies are tucked into a pram when we've seen others flying through the town with tiny bows and arrows. They will be once they grow their wings, she answers, bending down to straighten a white ruffled tunic on the 3rd baby in the back. Have a sweet day, she says to me, smiling, before starting to push the pram away. The baby releases my finger and begins making a fussing sound, followed by a full wail, but the woman keeps pushing them up the cobbled street, humming to the infants in a gentle, sugary sing-song. I wonder if someday Jack and I will have our own pram filled with tiny skeletons and rag dolls. Ugh. The scuffle of little feet through the house, skeleton boys tumbling down the spiral stairs, little ragdoll girls with their threads coming loose, always needing their fingers and toes stitched back together. A perfectly grim little family. Jack plucks a single lavender rose growing beside the patisserie, then holds it out to me. For the Queen of Halloween Town, he says with a goofy little tip of his head, as if he likes the sound of it. Queen. But the word echoes along the walls of my fabric insides, making me shiver. Still, I take the flower from him and bring it to my nose, all soft petals and a silky springtime scent. Jack weaves his fingers back through mine and whisks me up the street, away from the main center of town, and down a winding path through a thicket of stargazer flowers that open up to a wide river. 4 small wooden boats sit tied to the shore, and Jack climbs into the bow of one with a lavender heart painted on the side, then takes hold of an oar. I don't think we should, I said. We don't know who they belong to. We'll only borrow it, he replies with a wink, and I can't help but smiling back. He takes my hand and helps me into the teetering little boat. We push off from the shore, and I dip my hand down into the water, but its surface is thick like mud. What is it? Jack runs a finger along the top, then brings it to his mouth. Chocolate! He sinks his hand in again, then leans forward to place a dollop of warm melted chocolate on the end of my nose. I laugh, wiping it clean, then scoop up a handful of the chocolate river and lob it in his direction. He ducks just in time, barely missing it, and grinning wildly, but he doesn't see the next wad of chocolate I launch towards him, and it splats right across his bone-white face. A deep, rolling belly laugh rises inside of me, and I buckle forward, giggling so hard I feel I might split one of my seams. Jack is still laughing when I climb over the narrow bench separating us and kiss him square on the lips, tasting the sugary sweetness of dark chocolate. Thank you for bringing me here, I whisper against his mouth. He smiles. We can spend our lives exploring the other holidays together, as king and queen. He kisses me again, his hand tracing the seam along my right cheekbone. But the word catches in my chest again. Queen. Like a thorn pricking at my linen flesh, digging deeper, burrowing. I can't seem to shake it. I'm still not used to it, I admit softly, leaning back against the side of the boat. What? Being called a queen. Jack rests the oars at the edge of the boat and leans forward, letting the current pull us through the canals of Valentine's Town, along the boardwalk, lined with cafes and chocolate shops, and even a greeting card store with handmade paper cards fluttering in the window. Halloween Town has never had a queen before, he said, tracing the stitching along my palm with his bony finger. You are the first. His dark, moonless eyes stare into mine, rooting me to him, and I feel a comfort in his gaze I've never known anywhere else. You are now the queen of all Halloween. I bite the inside of my cheek, lowering my chin. What if I don't know how to be a queen? What if I do it all wrong? I peer at Jack through my eyelashes, afraid to meet his gaze dead on. Ruby Valentina was so charming and flawless and queen-like, and I don't know if I can be like that. Jack reveals a half-smirk, glancing at me through his hooded eyes. "You're not the Queen of Valentine's Town. You're the Queen of Halloween Town." He lifts his chin and smiles fully. "And since you are the very first queen, you get to decide how you want to rule." He kisses my palm, lingering there, before lifting his eyes to mine again. "You are the Pumpkin Queen, Sally. You can do whatever you want." I nod, not wanting to believe him, needing to, because the doubt churning in my stomach feels like like tomb beetles tunneling through a corpse in the graveyard, breaking me apart. He shifts closer, the boat rocking beneath us, and kisses me again, the coolness of his lips soothing my rumbling thoughts for the tiniest of moments. He kisses me deeper, wrapping his palm around my back, along the seam of my spine, and I feel anchored to him. My fabric flesh bound to the cold of his skeleton bones. His fingers find my neck, my jaw. I feel myself breaking, melting, sinking beneath his touch, like he will never let me go, like we could stay this way forever, drifting down the chocolate river. I tell myself to forget who I'm supposed to be, because right now I am simply a rag doll in a boat with a skeleton whom I love, madly, feverishly, floating through a town where my title doesn't matter. Queen, 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 where no one knows who I am. At last, Jack lifts his mouth from mine and little sparks blink behind my threaded eyelashes. I want to pull him back to me, tell him not to let me go, but the boat has shifted, slowed against a clot of chocolate truffles along the bank, and Jack lifts the oars, steering us back into the center of the river, where the chocolate currents takes us beyond the edge of town, winding into a small rose-hued forest. I sink back against the bow of the boat, letting my arm drape over the side, watching Jack row with each perfect stroke of his arms, a bead of sweat glinting on his forehead. I tilt my eyes back and stare up into the perfect blue sky, not wanting to lose myself in a daydream, in the foolish idea that we could stay here in Valentine's Town forever. 2 cupids flutter past overhead, and a thin line of heart glitter trailing down behind them. I like it here, in the quiet of this strange forest, where the pink tulips grow wild beneath the canopy of trees, and hearts have been carved into the white elms with names etched into the bark. Jack and plus Sally, forever. We watch the cotton candy pink sunset fade beyond the trees outside the town, sipping glasses of muddled tulip wine, then collapse onto the feathery, soft bed inside the cottage, giggling, hands entwined, and I'm certain no moment could ever be as perfect as this. The swimming in my chest, Jack reciting nonsense poems, then laughing to himself. I want this to last forever. I want it to always just be Jack and me, side by side, until the end of time. But when I finally drift off to sleep, my dreams are fitful and strange. I dream of Halloween Town pulled into a nameless darkness. I wander the streets alone, struggling to make sense of each building, calling out to Jack, searching for him. In the shadowed dark of our home, in Dr. Finkelstein's lab, even on Spiral Hill where we shared our first kiss. I grow desperate, fear edging along my seams. I stand in the center of town, and I scream. The echo of it rattles in my ears, my chest, and I bolt awake. The blanket's pulled up to my throat. Jack is sound asleep beside me. I relax my fingers against the pale pink blankets, embroidered with little hearts, and turn onto my side, peering at the small square window. A dim pastel light is breaking through the trees, slanting into our little cottage, Jesus. It's already morning, but my dream of Halloween Town, of the darkness that slunk along dusty corners, a terror building in my throat, lingers inside of me, unshakable. Jack stirs beside me, reaching out a hand to stroke his fingers through my hair. "Good morning, wife," he says softly. I turn to meet his eyes, the coldness rimmed around their dark center, familiar in a way I don't think I will ever tire of. "Good morning, husband," I echo. He pulls me closer, and we stay this way for a time, his breath against my ear, a moment I don't dare shatter with words by telling him of the dream, of the nerves bouncing along my stitched ribs, But soon the birds begin to chatter from the trees, and the sounds of Valentine's Town waking echo through the streets, reaching us in the quiet of our cottage. Our honeymoon is over. After a breakfast of butterscotch pancakes with caramel syrup, Jack carries our suitcase through the cottage door, and we make our way beyond the edge of Valentine's Town, back to the grove of 7 trees. I pause and glance over my shoulder, the scent of sugar cookies dipped in chocolate hanging in the air. I still hold the lavender rose Jack picked for me yesterday, but the farther we walk from Valentine's Town, the more the petals begin to wilt, turning dry in my hand. It won't last. By the time we return to Halloween Town, it will surely be dead. A flower is only meant for this world. Ready to go home? Jack says with a grin once we've entered the circle of trees. I wish we could stay a little longer, I admit. He pulls open the door with the orange pumpkin etched onto it. Halloween is only 2 weeks away, he reminds me. We need to get back. I nod, tilting my eyes up to the branches one last time, where the wind has shaken loose molecule-sized flowers and set them free on the warm air. But we'll return, he assures, holding out his hand for me to take. I had been nervous about leaving Halloween Town, but now, only a day later, I find I'm not ready to go back. Still, I take Jack's hand, and we step through the small doorway. A whirl of tiny pumpkins spinning past my vision, and in an instant, we're whisked back to Halloween Town. I think that'll do it for today. Only so long I can read before my throat starts hurting. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. I hope you can forgive my dyslexia, fumbling words. Definitely reads like a fan fiction to me. I don't know about you guys. I might not be able to hold back my reactions. Please tune in tomorrow where I'll continue another 2 chapters, reading Long Live the Pumpkin Queen on this, our spooky trot towards Halloween. Ciao, Bellas.